Joining me now for her say, the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. Well, Senator Price, welcome. What's your response to those comments from former colleague Ken Wyatt?
Oh, well, I find it absolutely remarkable, in fact, that he's actually showing an interest in a place like Alice Springs, because there wasn't much interest in Alice Springs previously in his previous role, but he also evidently doesn't understand the role of local government, the core business of rates, roads and rubbish, or the fact that the town camps in and around Alice Springs were the responsibility of Tunganjira Council that are federally funded, as well as funded by the Territory Government, who actively campaign on behalf of Labor at elections also. But I do find it quite remarkable that evidently the Yes campaign must be on the back foot, because now he's come out to personally attack myself, Warren Mundine, and not known any of the work that I've done, obviously, during my time on council. I guess a significant piece was when my motion was supported to initiate a pathway for young people from diversion from the justice system into apprenticeships and traineeships through the council. Of course, there are elements that that are obviously missed along the way, but I say, he did have the role as Minister for Indigenous Australians, but that role he sought to empower bureaucracies, the peaks, as opposed to, I guess, the people. I mean, personally, I found it difficult to gauge him on issues of significance, that I was concerned with, concerns around traditional owners, around being able to have real access to their own land for economic development opportunities. It was difficult to try to gauge those sorts of issues with him in his role at the time. But evidently it's my fault, and it's Warren Mundine's fault. But I'm not going to wear that. I'm here to fight on behalf of all Australians. I'm here to be realistic about the issues that Indigenous Australians in remote communities that I've certainly got close relationships with are concerned with. It's sour grapes for those on the Yes campaign, and it's about pushing forward.
Yeah, I did find it interesting. I mean, my memories of Ken Wyatt when I worked with him in government, he liked to stand on ceremony. I think you're right to pick up that point. He loved a big bureaucracy. He didn't like necessarily getting on the ground that often. I think he probably flew over Alice Springs more than he ever visited Alice Springs. But of course, on his watch, he and Scott Morrison didn't do anything about extending those grog bans. They knew they were likely to lapse, as they did after the election was held and Labor got into office. He could very well have extended those grog bans, because that period of time where they were not in place, we saw horrific harm in Alice Springs. Now, after all of the violence, they've been reinstated in part. But if Wyatt had been doing his job, he could have avoided all of that.
Absolutely, he could have avoided all of that, knowing full well the consequences of lifting those grog bans, knowing full well the inadequacy of the Territory Labor government. There are so many things that he could have put in place. And the fact that also, it was asked of me what sort of legacy I thought he'd left behind, and I really couldn't think of anything that of significance that he'd left behind after his particular role. But of course, apart from supporting the coalition of peaks, which really I haven't seen them, create any headway either in this particular space.